I never imagined that one day, the woman I respected most, my mother-in-law, would become the reason my marriage fell apart. When I first married Rayan, I was full of hope. He was charming, respectful, and I believed we would build a life filled with laughter, understanding, and love. I thought our story would be one of those rare marriages where trust never fades. But I was wrong. Because where there is love, sometimes envy hides quietly in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. His mother, Mrs. Naz, was that shadow. At first, she wore the mask of affection so perfectly that I couldn't see through it. She smiled, hugged me, called me her daughter. In front of Rayan, she was sweet, warm, caring. "You're the daughter I never had," she would say. And I used to feel proud, thinking I was lucky to have such an understanding mother-in-law. But her words were only sugar-covering poison. Behind Rayan's back, her tone changed completely. Her eyes became cold, her smile disappeared, and every word she spoke carried a hidden sting. She criticized everything, the way I cooked, the clothes I wore, even the way I spoke to her son. At first, I brushed it off. I told myself that maybe she was just adjusting, that she needed time to accept me. I tried harder every day. I helped her in the kitchen. I listened when she complained, and I stayed quiet even when her comments hurt. I thought silence was the key to peace. I thought love could melt her resistance. But her heart was made of something colder than I ever imagined. Her dislike grew into something darker. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about control. She couldn't stand that Rayan had someone else to care for, someone else who mattered to him. I started noticing little things, how she would pull him aside every time we laughed together, how she'd whisper things I couldn't hear and then glance at me as if daring me to ask what it was about. I could feel the distance forming, but I didn't want to believe it. Then came that one evening, the night everything inside me broke. I was setting the dinner table, humming softly, when I heard low voices from the kitchen. At first, I didn't mean to listen, but something about her tone stopped me. It wasn't her usual fake sweetness. It was sharp, cold, venomous. "She's not good enough for you," she said. "She's only after your money. She's pretending to be nice, but wait till you see her true colors." The words sliced through the air and straight into my chest. My hands froze. The spoon slipped from my fingers and clattered onto the floor. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to walk in and scream that it was all lies, that I loved him truly. But my body refused to move. My throat tightened, and all I could do was stand there trembling, while the woman I had respected so deeply tore apart the image of me she had created in his mind. When I finally gathered the courage to move, the conversation had ended. I could hear Rayan's footsteps leaving the kitchen, heavy and hesitant. He didn't say a word to me that night, not one. He just ate in silence, his eyes distant, his smile gone. I tried to ask if something was wrong, but he simply said, "I'm tired," and turned away. That night, as I lay beside him, I could feel it. A wall rising between us. It wasn't built of anger or hate. It was built of doubt. Doubt that she had planted, and it was already spreading through him like poison. I turned to look at him, hoping he'd turn back, hoping he'd see the tears in my eyes and understand. But he didn't. He just slept, peacefully unaware of the storm brewing inside me. And somewhere in the darkness of that house, I could almost sense her satisfaction. My mother-in-law smiling silently, knowing she had taken her first step in breaking the bond that once held her son and me together. In the weeks that followed, Rayan was no longer the man I had married. He became distant, almost unreachable. His laughter disappeared, his warmth faded, and every conversation felt like walking through a minefield. The silence between us grew heavier by the day. I would try to start small talks, to remind him of what we used to be. But he'd respond with short, cold sentences that left no space for love. One evening, I asked softly, "Rayan, is everything okay between us?" He sighed, irritated. "Not everything has to be about your feelings, Sarah." That one line cut deeper than he could imagine. Because I wasn't trying to make everything about me. I was trying to save us. Sarah, that's me. The woman who thought love could heal anything. The woman who believed that patience, kindness, and faith could hold a marriage together. But reality has a cruel way of teaching you that love alone isn't enough when manipulation is whispering in the background. Slowly, I began to see the truth. My marriage was turning into a battlefield. And the one leading the war wasn't Rayan or me. It was his mother. She had found a way to make herself the victim, to make me the villain, and to make her son the judge. It started subtly. She would come to me when Rayan wasn't around, pretending to be affectionate. Sarah, can you lend me some cash? Just for groceries. Rayan forgot to give me money this week, she'd say sweetly. I never questioned her. I handed her the money without hesitation. After all, she was family. But later, when Rayan came home, his tone would shift. Sarah, why did you withdraw money again? You've been spending a lot lately. Mom said you bought new things. My heart would sink. No, Rayan, He'd interrupt, frustrated. She wouldn't lie to me. Those words echoed in my head for days. She wouldn't lie to me. He said it like a commandment, like an unshakable truth. But to me, it sounded like a verdict, a quiet way of saying, I trust her more than you. And that's when I realized what I was really up against. I wasn't fighting one woman. I was fighting a mask of love, of innocence, of motherhood. She hid her venom behind soft words and emotional manipulation. To everyone else, she was the perfect mother. But to me, she was the silent storm destroying everything I held dear. The more she lied, the more Rayan pulled away. He stopped eating with me, stopped asking about my day, stopped smiling when he saw me. Every time I tried to explain, he would say, Sarah, please, stop overthinking. You always imagine problems. But I wasn't imagining it. The woman under the same roof was carefully rewriting our story, sentence by sentence, until even Rayan couldn't recognize the truth. My friends began noticing my change. Aisha, my closest friend, pulled me aside one day. Sarah, you've gone quiet. What's going on? I tried to smile, but it broke halfway. Nothing, just life. She looked straight into my eyes, her voice calm but firm. Sometimes people destroy peace just to prove they were right. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I went home that night thinking about them over and over. Maybe Aisha was right. Maybe this wasn't about love or acceptance anymore. Maybe my mother-in-law wasn't trying to protect her son. Maybe she just couldn't stand losing control over him. And as that realization sank in, I understood something painful but clear. I wasn't losing my husband because of who I was. I was losing him because someone else was scripting our story behind the curtain, and I had been too blind to see it until now. It was our 3rd wedding anniversary, a day I had dreamed of celebrating with warmth, laughter, and memories that would bring us closer again. I spent the whole day preparing a quiet dinner, setting the table with candles, Rayan's favorite dishes, and the photo frame from our wedding day. I kept checking the clock, each passing hour tightening the knot in my stomach. By 9, he still hadn't come home. I tried calling, texting, and no answer. I told myself he must be busy, maybe running late from work. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "He's avoiding you." When the clock struck midnight, the sound of the door unlocking made me jump. Rayan walked in, his face hard, his eyes cold. He didn't even glance at the table I had set so carefully. He just threw his phone onto the table with a sharp thud. "Explain this," he said, his tone filled with anger. I looked at the screen. My heart stopped. There were screenshots, fake chat messages, showing me talking intimately with another man. My head started spinning. They looked so real that for a moment even I was speechless. "Rayan, this isn't me," I said, my voice trembling. "These messages are fake. I've never even seen that number before." But he wasn't listening. He paced the room, his hands clenched, his face burning with betrayal. "Don't lie to me, Sarah. I've been hearing things for weeks. I wanted to believe you, but now—" He shook his head and looked away. Tears blurred my vision. "Please, Rayan, look at me. You know I would never do something like this." But he just grabbed his keys and said, "I need time to think," before slamming the door behind him. The silence that followed was unbearable. The dinner table still stood untouched. The candles had melted down to puddles, their flames dying slowly, just like my hope. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I turned and saw her, my mother-in-law, standing there with that same fake concern on her face. Her voice dripped with false sympathy as she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. I warned him, but he didn't listen. It was in that moment I finally saw her for who she truly was, not just manipulative but heartless. She had won. She had turned my husband against me completely. I didn't say a word. I couldn't. My chest felt hollow, my body numb. I walked to my room, took out a suitcase, and began packing my things. Every folded piece of clothing felt like a piece of my life being put away, a life she had stolen. When I stepped out with my bag, she stood watching, arms crossed, silent but victorious. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing me break. I just walked past her and left the house that was no longer a home. The moment I reached my parents' house, I couldn't hold back anymore. My mother opened the door, and before she could even ask, I collapsed into her arms, crying uncontrollably. The pain poured out of me in sobs I couldn't control. I lost everything, Ami, I whispered through my tears. Everything. She held me tightly, her voice soft but firm. No, Beta, she said. You only lose when you stop fighting for the truth. Those words sank deep into my heart. I didn't know it then, but that night wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped being the victim of her lies and began preparing to expose them. Months passed, and though the world around me kept moving, I remained stuck in the same moment, the moment everything fell apart. The pain followed me everywhere. It was like a shadow that refused to let go, haunting me even in silence. I tried to convince myself that time would heal, but every sunrise only reminded me of the life I had lost. Rayon never called. Not once, not even to ask if I was alive or broken. The silence from him was louder than any argument we had ever had. It told me everything, that he believed her, that he chose her over me. I heard through mutual friends that his mother had been telling everyone I was unfaithful. She didn't stop at destroying my marriage. She wanted to destroy my reputation too. In her version of the story, I was the liar, the manipulator, the woman who betrayed her husband. And people believed her, because she said it with tears in her eyes and a trembling voice that made her sound so innocent. Relatives started whispering when I entered a room. Some offered fake sympathy. Others looked at me with quiet judgment. Neighbors who once smiled now turned their faces away. I became a story, the woman who ruined her own marriage. There were nights I cried until my chest hurt. I'd stare at the ceiling, asking myself how truth could lose so easily to lies. But deep down, a small voice whispered, "You can't stay silent forever." One morning, that voice became louder, firm, certain. And that's when something inside me shifted. I decided that if she could spread lies, I could uncover truth. Not to beg for forgiveness or win Rayon back, but to reclaim my dignity. I began by revisiting those fake screenshots that had destroyed me. I studied every detail, the timestamps, the contact number, the typing style. Then I noticed something strange. The number wasn't mine, and it didn't match any of my friends either. When I traced it, it turned out to be registered under a fake ID. But the location? That was what made my heart race. It was from the same area where my mother-in-law's cousin lived, a man who often handled her errands and phone work. That was my first thread of truth, the first crack in her perfect mask. I knew I couldn't do it alone, so I called Aisha. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Whatever it takes, I'm with you," she said. Together, we started digging quietly, not emotionally, but smartly. We gathered everything we could. Piece by piece, the puzzle began forming. I found voice recordings where she complained about me to her friends, twisting every innocent action into something dirty. I found old messages between her and that cousin, talking about sending screenshots and teaching Sarah a lesson. I even traced financial transactions, money transferred to the same account that created those fake messages. It was undeniable. My mother-in-law had orchestrated everything. The lies, the manipulation, the setup. Every thread led back to her. The woman who had once called me daughter had become the architect of my destruction. But I wasn't that broken girl anymore. I wasn't going to cry behind closed doors while she basked in sympathy. I wanted justice, but not through shouting, not through arguments that could be twisted again. I wanted truth to speak for itself. That night, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Strength. I promised myself I would make her face what she had done. Not in private, where she could deny it, but in public, where everyone who had believed her lies would finally see her truth. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace, not because I forgave her, but because I finally had a purpose again. My plan was simple and poetic in a way. I didn't want to scream, I didn't want to fight, and I didn't want to play her game. I wanted her to choke on her own lies, not by my words, but by the truth she could no longer control. I knew exactly what mattered most to my mother-in-law, her image. She lived for it. Every day of her life revolved around how people saw her. Her reputation was her pride, her armor, and her greatest weakness. She loved being admired, the generous woman, the respected matriarch, the flawless mother. It was her stage, and she performed perfectly. So I decided to make that stage her undoing. She was planning a community fundraiser, a big event she'd been talking about for months. I'd seen the invitations floating around social media. An evening of grace and generosity hosted by Mrs. Naz. It was going to be the event of the season. Journalists, socialites, family friends. Even Rayan would be there as her proud son, smiling beside her like nothing had ever gone wrong. That's when it hit me. This was it. The perfect place. The perfect audience. The perfect moment. I spent nights thinking through every detail. I didn't want to act out of rage. I wanted precision. If I was going to do this, I needed to make sure that once the truth came out, there would be no room for denial, no space for twisting facts. I wanted her lies to collapse under their own weight. I reached out to a friend from college who now worked in event management. She was one of the coordinators helping organize the fundraiser. I told her I wanted to contribute a short surprise video tribute, something heartfelt, something emotional to honor my mother-in-law's kindness. My friend smiled over the phone. "That's so sweet of you, Sarah. She'll love it." If only she knew what the tribute really was. Over the next few days, I began assembling everything I had collected. Every recording, every message, every transaction. I sat for hours editing the clips together, my hands shaking at times, my heart pounding with both fear and resolve. The video started with warm family photos, the kind that would disarm the audience, and then slowly transitioned into the darker truth hiding behind those smiles. There was her voice, clear as day, saying, "She's not good enough for him. I'll make sure he sees her true colors." Then, the text messages she had fabricated. Then, the payment records proving she funded the fake number that sent those chats to Rayan. Every detail was laid out calmly, cleanly, unmistakably. It wasn't a scene of drama. It was a mirror, one that reflected her lies for everyone to see. As I watched the final cut, a strange calm washed over me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone reclaiming her truth. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making her suffer or humiliating her. It was about balance, about letting truth take its rightful place after being buried under deceit for so long. I knew what would happen once the video played. People would talk. Rayan would be forced to see what he'd refused to believe. And she, the woman who built her world on reputation, would finally stand in the wreckage of her own lies. Truth doesn't scream. It doesn't demand attention. It simply reveals. And in that revelation, everything false begins to crumble. And that was my plan, to let the truth speak, publicly, powerfully, and silently destroy the deception she had built so carefully. The night of reckoning had finally arrived. It wasn't just another evening. It was the night everything would shift. I dressed simply. No makeup, no jewelry, no mask. I didn't need to look beautiful. I needed to look real. For months, lies had painted me as a villain. Tonight, truth would wash that paint away. When I entered the grand hall, every whisper sliced through the air like a blade. Isn't that Sarah? She's the one who cheated, right? Why would she show her face here? Each murmur was a reminder of the story my mother-in-law had so carefully written, and how everyone had believed it. But tonight, that story was about to be rewritten. Live. My eyes locked on her immediately. Mrs. Naz, radiant under the golden lights, posing for cameras with her perfect smile. The woman who'd destroyed my marriage stood surrounded by admirers, her laughter echoing through the room like she had nothing to hide. When she spotted me at the entrance, her face froze for half a second. Then she quickly adjusted her expression, pretending not to care. But I saw it. That flicker of fear beneath her polished calm. The event began. Speeches. Polite applause. Empty compliments. I waited, heartbeat steady, eyes fixed on the stage. Then the host smiled and announced, "Now, we have a special surprise tribute for our beloved Mrs. Naz, a woman of grace, kindness, and strength." Perfect. The lights dimmed. The hall quieted. The screen flickered to life. At first, everything looked ordinary. A slideshow of happy memories, family photos, smiles, Rayan and I at our wedding, her holding our hands. A soft melody played in the background. People murmured approvingly. And then, the shift. The music faded, replaced by a single cold voice. Her voice. "She's not good enough. I'll make sure he sees her true colors." Gasps echoed through the hall. Heads turned. The next clip rolled, screenshots of the fake chats, followed by the payment trail linking back to her. And then came the final blow, her own recorded confession. I had to do it. She was taking my son away from me. Silence. The kind that burns. Every face turned toward her. The perfect mother. The innocent victim. Rayan stood in the front row, motionless. His eyes darted between me and the screen, disbelief turning into devastation. The room that once echoed with applause now vibrated with stunned whispers. When the video ended, the lights came back on, harsh, unflattering, merciless. She stood trembling, pale as the tablecloth beside her. The same woman who'd smiled so confidently minutes earlier now looked small, cornered by her own deceit. People didn't know where to look. Some avoided her gaze. Others stared openly. No one clapped. No one spoke. And me? I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Truth had done what I couldn't. It had spoken for me, louder than any defense, sharper than any revenge. That night, I walked out of the hall with my head high, leaving her to face the ruins of her own lies. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Rayan walked toward me slowly, his steps heavy with regret. The confident man I once knew was gone. In his place stood someone broken, someone who finally saw the truth too late. I didn't know, he said, his voice trembling, eyes filled with shame. Tears welled in my eyes, but they weren't from love anymore. They were from exhaustion. "You never wanted to," I whispered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was filled with everything that could have been. Trust, laughter, a life unspoiled by lies. He tried to speak again, but I stopped him gently. "This isn't about us anymore," I said firmly. "This is about truth, and what it cost." The hall behind us was still echoing with fragments of disbelief. Guests had begun to leave, whispering in shock, their eyes wide with judgment. Not for me this time, but for her. My mother-in-law sat alone at the table, her hands shaking, the same hands that had once stirred poison into every word about me. Her reputation, The empire she'd built on false grace collapsed that night. People who once praised her now crossed the street to avoid her. Invitations stopped coming. Her smile faded from the community's gossip circles. She disappeared from events, from conversations, from the spotlight she worshipped. Her name became a warning, a quiet lesson about how deception, no matter how well crafted, eventually consumes its creator. But I didn't celebrate her downfall. There was no satisfaction in watching someone drown in their own lies, only a strange, quiet peace. I didn't go back to Rayon, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. I needed to find me again. Not the woman defined by marriage or betrayal or gossip, but the woman who refused to stay broken. Months later, he came to see me again. He looked different, older, softer, humbled. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I've learned my lesson. I was blind, and you paid the price." For a moment, I saw the man I once loved, not the one shaped by his mother's lies, but the one who used to hold my hand and promise forever. I smiled faintly, not with bitterness, but with understanding. "Sometimes love isn't about going back," I said. "It's about letting go, with peace." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "You're right," he said. "Maybe this is the closure we both needed." As he turned to leave, I felt something shift inside me. The weight of years lifting, replaced by something lighter, freer. The pain didn't vanish overnight, but for the first time, it didn't control me. The truth had cost me my marriage, but it had given me something far greater, myself. Looking back now, I finally understand something I couldn't see before. Revenge doesn't always come from rage. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is the quiet unveiling of truth, delivered at the moment it's needed most. My mother-in-law tried to destroy me using lies, clever, venomous lies that spread like fire. But in her obsession to break me, she ended up burning herself. Because no matter how perfect a lie looks under the spotlight, it cannot survive the sunrise of truth. I used to think silence made me weak, that by not shouting, not defending myself, I was surrendering. But silence, I learned, is strength in disguise. It's the calm before justice arrives. It's the patience that gives truth the space to gather power. The night I revealed her lies wasn't about vengeance. It was about freedom. The freedom that comes when you stop begging to be understood and start standing in your own truth. If you've ever been betrayed, if someone has twisted your story to make you the villain, remember this. You don't have to fight dirty to win. You don't have to scream to be heard. Just stand firm. Wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, let the truth speak, because truth doesn't need defense. It only needs courage.